Well, good evening, everyone. I keep on wondering, why do I always say yes to Gabe? Well, it's not really yes to him, it's more yes to you guys, because you guys are great. And every year I've been able to thank you, Gabe. He's a good guy. But I always forget how far away you guys are. First I went to that other church, what's it called, North something, or Crosswood, or Northwood? I rolled down the window and I said, is this St. Elizabeth Anne? No, it's Puerto Rico. And I just went out really slow. Well, it's good to be here, and we're living a beautiful time of year, which is Easter. But I really believe, honestly, that Easter is meaningless if you don't remind yourself every single day of what led up to it. Okay? In other words, if you're on a team, volleyball team, football team, basketball team, the victory is greater when you take into account all the sacrifices that you made. If you're the underdog, if you're the one that no one ever expects to win, that's what makes the victory sweeter. And I was asking myself, if you remember today's gospel passage, how many of you went to church today? Thank you. Well, does anybody remember what the first reading was? Huh? Fish. Oh yeah, no, that was the gospel. What was the first reading? Yes, Angel. Please stand up so everybody can see what a beautiful young lady.
When Simon Peter was being talked to by the
Sanhedrin.
Yeah, Sanhedrin.
He was being ripped apart.
Wanted to stop.
Yeah. Peter, who was not very brave before, the Sanhedrin, the Jews were telling him, we've told you over and over again, stop speaking in this man's name. And what did they do afterwards to them? They whipped them. They whipped them. And after they whipped them, what did the apostles say? They said, it says they rejoiced. When I read, I don't know about you, but when I read that, I was like, they rejoiced. And immediately, it went back to my old days, when I was a kid. And my mother said, okay, you're going to get a spanking. You go, no. And and my mother would be like, baby, I haven't even hit you yet. And I put my hands up. And I my mother was cruel. She was cruel. Most parents, you say to them, I don't know about you, but I once told my mother, just once, I told her, I hate you. And you know what my mother said? She said, okay, just remember one thing. I hate you more. No mother says that. No, not. They'll be like, and they'll be like, I love you no matter what you say. And my mother, I hate you. I'm not kidding. This is not a comedy show, okay? Took years to hear it. No. So, but why in the world would they be rejoicing that they got whipped? And it was because they could suffer a little bit like the Lord. That was what they got so much pride in the fact that they could suffer just like Christ did. You've got to get to the same point. All of you. Where you can take pride in being mocked, ridiculed, scorned, out of love for Jesus Christ. It wasn't like that before. Why were the apostles so shocked when they began to hear those first rumors that Jesus had risen from the dead? Why? Why? Is it because they had never seen anyone rise from the dead? No. No. Believe me when I tell you that. No. Because if you remember, don't you remember Lazarus rose from the dead? Do you remember a little girl, Tabitha, a 12-year-old, Tabitha? She rose from the dead. And then there was a young man who was actually in a procession. He was being buried. And his poor mother was behind weeping. And Jesus said, he is not dead. And he touched him, and the boy rose from the dead. So, why were they shocked? Why? I'll tell you, this is what I know. It's because they could never have imagined that someone who had suffered so much could be loved so much. That's why. Is God really good? That's what they were saying to themselves. If he was good, how could he allow his son to suffer like that? That's why they were shocked. They could never put the two together. To suffer so much and be loved so much. Because you guys, come on, we all think that when we're going through hell, that God does not love me, God does not care about me, or God does not exist. And that's why they had a hard time believing. How can this be true? Well, my dear friends, it shocked them that it was true. That God could love so much, even love us, while we're going through the worst times of our life. Not too long ago, I was driving over, I live in Dallas, okay? There we have it. So we have the gallery, you know, that big mega mall there. And so I go there, you know, I try to go there at least twice a week to do some exercise. What do you think, I'm going to go shop there? How much are those trips aside? $50. I thought it was fine. So I go there, you know, instead of spending money at LA Fitness for 24 hours, so I go there, I go first floor, second floor, third floor, second floor, first floor. I wear sunglasses so that nobody recognizes me. They always recognize me. My parishioners, are you Father Alfonse? So I was driving to the Galleria, and I have to admit, you know, St. Monica's a beautiful place, it's a wonderful place, but I was just going, I was having a hard time with it. Something that I had worked on for a long time, prepared, and I got shot down. My idea, my work, everything. And so I'm driving, and I get a phone call from this mom. And I know them very well. And she said, you know, she said, hi, Father, how you doing? I said, good. What's the phone call? Well, my daughter, she's turning 10, and she wanted to invite you to her birthday party. I said, no! So, you know, it was nice. And so she said, you know, would you go? And I said, of course, thank you so much, you know. She said, well, you didn't, and I said to her, you don't have to call me. And she was, well, I wanted to ask you a question. So it was like something so they hang out crazy. So she said, you know, my daughter invited, this is a true story, yeah, don't make up story. So my daughter, so she said, my daughter invited one of her friends who's handicapped. And she's in a wheelchair, one of those motorized wheelchairs. And she said, Father, you know, I don't know if we should invite her. I said, well, why not? Invite her, don't worry about it. She says, well, the thing is that my daughter's bedroom is on the second floor of the house. And so, you might not know, but the girls, when they get together, they love to hang out in the bedroom. So I'm worried that if she comes over, this little girl, and she can't, and everybody wants to go to the bedroom, she won't be able. I said, okay, well, why don't you give the mother a call? And she said, sure. So she called me back. And she said, she was almost crying. And I said, well, what happened? She said, well, the mother told me, look, if you don't mind, my daughter can crawl up the stairs. And then you get that feeling in your heart, right? Where your heart just starts to. But sometimes that feeling you get in your heart, you get confused between two emotions: feeling sorry for someone and feeling proud of someone. See, I wasn't feeling sorry for her. I felt very proud of her. And you know what? Because what she doesn't do so easily, I do so easily. And what is that? What she doesn't do, I do very easily. Huh? No. No. I give up. I give up. Going up the stairs is nothing. Nothing. Meaningless compared to what she does. She doesn't give up. And I do. A lot of times. And I would say that maybe 90% of all my failures in my life have been because I gave up too quickly and I gave up too much too soon. You learn a lot when you're a priest. Because you learn a lot, you get to know a lot of people. And that was the perfect phone call I needed on that day. And you know what? The apostles, they never gave up. Even when they were being whipped, when they were being beaten, they never gave up. And I don't want you to. I don't want any of you to. Because when you're going through hell in your life, it doesn't mean that God doesn't love you. It either means two things. Either you're walking away from Him too soon, too quickly, or you're doing exactly what the Lord wants you to do. Okay? And you're going to suffer. If you follow Jesus Christ in your life, you will suffer. But it doesn't mean He doesn't love you. It means He does. And He can work with you. That's why, guys and girls, I'll tell you something. With teenagers, I work in 3 schools, high schools. But there's one thing that I realize that teenagers do really bad. Even in our country, we do it really bad. We are a very kind country, but we don't know how to love. We're very kind, but we're not loving. What does that mean? Let me tell you. To be kind means to let people hear what they want to hear. Right? I don't want to offend anyone. I don't want to offend anyone. So what do? I agree with everyone. I tell everyone exactly what they want to hear. And I don't say a word. Right? But when you love someone, then you tell them what they don't want to hear. Because you want them to be good. You really care about them. And if you notice, the people who love you the most are the people who are the toughest with you. They're not necessarily kind to you. Your friends are kind to you. Your parents are not necessarily kind to you. It's true. Why? Your little brother, that little... He will tell you what you don't want to hear. But maybe you need to hear. And your little sister, right? Or whatever, That's why, you know what? That's why we love people we don't know. We love people we don't know. Because the more you don't know someone, the more you love them. Have you ever noticed? Honestly. You're very kind to people you don't know. If it's your brother, what do you want? You little rat. But if it was someone else, hello, how are you? Nice to meet you. It's true. We love Lady Gaga. But, everybody, 32 million fans, or Twitter fans of Lady Gaga. But imagine if she lived in your house. And she comes out dressing up like in a meat dress. Hey, that came from our refrigerator. Yeah, I wonder where was it? Well, you know good for nothing. We love people when they're far away from us. You're the best! Stay away! But as soon, that's why we get into the biggest arguments with family members, and we get into the biggest arguments with our closest friends. If they're really good friends. Why? Because they'll tell us not always what we want to hear. And my dear friends, this is what it means to live in Easter. It means to grow. And it means to really take responsibility. Not only for yourselves, but also for the people that are around you. And to take pride. Take pride in the fact that if you speak in His name, it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be worthwhile. That is what I have learned in my life. That's what we want to share with you. The good news is this, that no matter how much you suffer in your life, if you follow the Lord in your life, if you live up to the expectations that He has from each and every one of you, life will be tough, but it will be worth living. It will be very much worth it. Thank you. Here, why don't you stand up so everybody can see you? I have to stand up and
How do you remember Jesus in times of suffering?
well, the question was, how do you remember Jesus in times of suffering? And that's probably the worst moment to remember. Because what you should do is you should remember Him at all times. And what happens is if you do that, in other words, if you pray every day, and one of the best ways and one of the easiest ways to pray is just take the gospel passage of the day. Okay, so you wake up in the morning, first thing I would do, well, this is what I do. I wake up, shower, put on my clothes. Before I eat, I read the gospel of the day, before I celebrate Mass. And after I read it, I spend 10-15 minutes to think about it. That is praying. That is praying. And the reason why I say, if you wait until you're suffering, it's almost like you're using your friend. And I don't think that's the best way to prepare yourself for those moments of difficulty and trial. The best way to prepare is a constant daily prayer that reminds you that as a Christian, my life is a paradox. It's going to be lived in a different way. Right? My life is not going to end the way I want it to, but the way that the Lord wants it to. And that prepares me. It prepares me. So the best way to prepare for times of trial and tribulation and difficulties and suffering is beforehand. I need to go to the Lord at all times, before and after. Okay? And an easy way to do that is every morning you pray for 15 minutes. Read the gospel, reflect it. That's it. And if you do that every day, it's going to little by little start penetrating deeper and deeper into your heart. How do you know? You got to do it. Right? Father, my faith is weak. Okay, how do you increase your faith? Okay, but if you just pray, the best way to increase your faith, take a leap of faith. Okay? How do you increase your faith? You have to take a leap of faith. Okay. What does that mean? It means this. You hate me, I won't hate you. You don't love me, I will never stop loving you. You don't forgive me, I will forgive you. What's the typical reaction? You hate me, I hate you. And I mean no. You hurt me, I will make your life painful. You don't forgive me, I could care less. You don't love, I don't remember now which one. You didn't do anything, I don't care. Right? But ladies, gentlemen, right? That is the normal response. Come on. Anybody that said that Christianity makes sense is a liar. Is a liar. It doesn't make sense. The first shall be last and the last shall be first. What? Love your enemies. Love your enemies. Are you kidding? No. How do you increase your faith? Take a leap of faith. You know, one time I went to, every day I try as hard as I can to do something different. Okay? Doesn't happen every day, but once in a while I get that inspiration. I went to the bank, Chase, right? Not too long ago, Chase Bank, right? Had to do a little deposit for St. Monica. And I'm walking out of the bank, and this woman, all elegant, super business woman, right? With a little attaché case, we're both going towards the door at the same time. Okay? So we're both leaving at the same time. I'm leaving, she's leaving, we're like, and all of a sudden I said, wait. I go first. In other words, I go out of the bank. Right? Because we were both at the door. And so I said, okay, I go first. You should have seen, she was like, what? I said, I go first. Why do you go first? I said, how else am I going to open the door for you? And she was like, no. But you should have seen the smile. She was like, oh, thank you. I know I'm right. Then you ruin it. That's when you ruin it, right? No, believe me. I need to do that because okay, now I'm going to tell confession, okay? If you remember, not too long ago, Fort Worth and Dallas diocese, you guys are Fort Worth diocese, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Fort Worth and Dallas, they invited Steve Martin to come and, do a presentation. Steve Martin, does everybody know who Steve Martin is? He's a famous comedian. And so Catholic Charities invited him to come. And so, all the priests, I thought all the priests were invited. So I drove all the way to the Anatole Hotel. It's a really super nice, fancy hotel. Bring in my Nissan Altima. Valet parking. Go into the hotel, get up to the front desk, true story. And I said, I'm here for the event. And they're like, oh, Father, what's your name? I said, Father Alfonse. Hey. You're not there. I said, what? I said, yeah, your name's not there. I said, well, aren't we all invited? She goes, well, no, you have to buy a ticket. I said, well, how much is the ticket? You know, $300. I said, $300? I said, yeah, I'm sorry. I said, it's okay, I didn't want to be here. So I was furious. So I walk, and true, I mean, this is confession, okay? So I walk out, and I go back to the valet, and they're like, what happened? I said, I had to drop off some important documents for the bishop tonight. I just lied. What am I going to say? I'm not invited. So I just said, I'm sorry. I had to drop off some documents. Oh, okay. So I get in my car, and of course, when you're driving and you're upset, everybody drives slow. Get out of the way! And I was hungry. So right around the time I got to St. Monica, we have a Wendy's. So I went to Wendy's. I went through the drive-thru. And so it was an Asian woman. You could hear it in the voice, Can I take your order? I said, I'll take a number 1 and a frosty. And she's like, do you want cheese? I said, with my frosty? And she's like, $7. So I go over to the window. I roll down the window. Like that. This is a true story. I go over to the window. I roll down the window. And the lady looks at me and she goes, Father Alfonse? I said, no, I'm Father Stephen. And I was like, yeah. And she goes, I go to St. Monica. And she said, you know what, Father? It's on me. It was like, but you know what? This is what I'm talking about. You're rude to me, I will not be rude to you. Right? You see, guys, this lady got it. She understood. That's how you change the world. You will not change anyone or anything if they change you. In other words, if they make you just like they are. Nothing will change. Nothing. This world will continue to be a living hell. As a Christian, you're called to shock the hell out of the world. Literally, shock the hell. Get the hell out of the people, out of this world. How do you do that? By responding in a way that imitates the life of Jesus Christ. You think it's easy? It's not easy. Everything I told you is absolutely true and very difficult. Okay? Everything I told you, you know it. You know in your heart this is the truth. And how many of you have been confirmed? Okay. And when you were confirmed, you basically said, I believe you. It's tough, but I believe. I'm a priest. And I lose my patience with people. And when I know I shouldn't. Because that's when you change people. Not any other way. Okay? So, sorry. That was one question. Anybody still want to dare ask another one? Yes.
Can you talk about your journey
was that?
Can you talk about your journey with the priesthood?
My journey? Well, the shortest version, okay? Well, I grew up in New York. Yeah? New York. You're from Brooklyn, son. It's good. Buffalo? I'm from Rochester. I'm from Rochester. Yeah. We're better. So, no, that's great. That's great. Buffalo is a wonderful place. I would never want to live there. Freezing cold. Freezing cold. You talk about snow, they make it for the world. They make it, right? Doesn't Buffalo get like, you know? Exactly. So, I grew up in Rochester. I grew up in a typical Italian family where we never went to church except for Easter and Christmas. And my dad would complain, he always talks about Christ's birth. Yeah, Dad, because that's the only time we ever come. But literally, my dad was a professor, he's a lawyer, so I never won an argument with him. And, but for him, he made it very clear, the most important thing in life is to make money. Make money. Make money. You gotta go to college, you gotta become an engineer. So I became an engineer. I got my master's in chemical engineering. I worked at Kodak for 4 years with the government, which was probably the neatest thing. I used to fly back and forth to Washington, D.C. when we were at war, because Kodak, we used to make the films for the satellites and for the Air Force. And so it was a great job, it was a great career. Then one day, I met this young lady who was not Catholic, but she was a very strong, wonderful, beautiful Christian woman. But she thought, unfortunately, like some other denominations think that we go to hell, that we're not Christian. Can you imagine? Catholics are not Christian. So she kind of forced me to learn my faith extremely, really well, because I was like, is this true? And I learned it. And I learned my faith, and I fell in love with it. And it's all God's will. God has a way of getting us. When He wants us, He gets us. And I just opened up my heart, and 20 years I've been doing, I've been a religious for 20 years. I've been a priest for 10 years, and I love it. It's not easy, but it is extremely rewarding. That was like in a nutshell. Any other questions? Yes.
So you have your
You have to stand up.
So you have your blog, and you read your blog teaching. So how do you go about, sharing your faith or giving little tidbits of it every day to other people?
Well, every day, like I told you, how do I pray? Every day I meditate and reflect on the gospel. Then what I do is I write it out. And I post it on a blog that I have. And maybe, Gabe can tell you where it is. But the thing is that it just, by reflection and meditation, by reading. For example, where did I learn this difference between kindness and love? From C.S. Lewis, who wrote a book called The Problem of Pain. If God is so loving, why is there pain in the world? Well, He answers the question. He tries because he's reflected and he's meditated on it. And here's a man that used to be an atheist who became a Christian. And so he wrote a beautiful book called The Problem of Pain. And in the very beginning of the book, he says, look, everything I told you is absolutely true, but it's very hard. It doesn't take away the pain that you experience, but at least we understand where and what is pain for. Parents suffer tremendously for their children. And why even have children? Well, because out of love. Out of love. Imagine if you have a dog. Imagine you have a dog. And this dog looks at you, and he must think once in a while, do you really love me? I mean, you forced me to go outside to poop. You're constantly feeding him all these nutritional meals. Right? I know this woman that every week she makes rice, oatmeal, and chicken, and she blends it all together, freezes it, and she gives this dog the same meal every day. And he loves it. But if you think about it, this is a great relationship, although it's an analogy, okay, it's not perfect, but between God and man, God and us, and what happens, sometimes we wonder, do you really love us? But He's lifting us up. And just like you're doing with the dog, this dog is having a wonderful life, even though sometimes he asks himself, if he could, why am I not outside? Why am I? Well, because life will be shorter for you. But here, you're loved. And we take care of you. And you bring so much joy into our life. And we hope that we bring joy to your life. And therefore, even though there are constraints, you can only be here, you can only do this here, you should only eat that. There's a love. Even though it seems like there's a pain associated with it. We have people that don't even believe in God responding on my blog. So that has been a beautiful blessing. Someone wrote to me once, a comment saying, God is like believing in unicorns. Right? And I wrote back and I said, I believe in unicorns. And the person, we had this little dialogue, and the person wrote back and said, unicorns don't exist. And I said, obviously you haven't gone to a toy store, have you? And there are millions of them. And the person said, no, I mean a real flesh and blood unicorn. I said, well, you know what? I'll be honest with you. Maybe one day we'll be smart enough, human beings will be smart enough, to take the DNA from a horse, a bird, and a narwhal. But I said, shh, look at this. But I said this. Okay, one day we might be able to take credit for the unicorn, but we can't take credit for the narwhal. Okay? We can take credit for the unicorn. Yeah, right now we're only good enough in stuffing one, making one that's stuffed. But it doesn't mean I can take credit for the narwhal. And let me tell you something. It really helped this person out. And just the way you look at the world, guys, girls, it's the way. Can you imagine? How can you take for granted this? You. And yet, we do. Every single day. I remember when that movie Avatar came out in the movie theater? Yeah. Well, the one with the blue people. I remember I took a group of kids, middle school kids, right? It was a field trip, so we went to go see it. We have a really cool school. And so we go to see the movie, and this little kid that's sitting next to me goes to his father, wouldn't it be cool if we had two sons? I looked at him and I said, isn't one enough? He's like, no. Just, okay? I mean, isn't one enough? I mean, guys, girls, we don't realize. We don't, if we think about it long enough, we have to be amazed. We have to be amazed. Okay? Any other questions? No other questions? Well, let me see, I just had one more thing. Just a few days ago, on April 11th, President Obama gave the highest military honor medal you can receive in the U.S. military. And he gave it to a man named Captain Emil Kaplan. And this man, he fought in Korea. And just now, they're finally acknowledging that he deserved a Medal of Honor. What did he do? Well, he never carried a weapon. But there was this moment in the battle where the Americans had to retreat, where we had to retreat. And the Chinese and the North Koreans were coming closer and closer. And he would not leave the wounded. So he stayed with the wounded. He was captured. And they forced all these soldiers, American soldiers, to do a 1,000-mile hike. If any of them slowed down, they would be shot. If any of them fell down, they would be shot. There was a moment where one soldier, Sergeant Miller, who was actually at the ceremony when President Obama gave the Medal of Honor, Sergeant Miller fell to the ground because his ankle had been shattered by a grenade. And the Chinese soldier came up to him to shoot him, and Captain Emil, he went between the soldier and the Chinese soldier, the barrel pointing at him, and he just stood. And the Chinese soldier looked at him and left. And so he was credited, this man was credited in saving the lives of 200 American soldiers. Because they used to call him the good thief. Because when they arrived to the military, to the POW camp, he would steal food. And he gave the food to the other soldiers who were wounded. Well, Captain Emil finally received the recognition that he deserved. But he's also known as Father Emil Catholic, because he was a Roman Catholic priest. And boys and girls, it's one thing when you see an old man crying like a baby. But when President Obama listed all the things that he had done, Father Emil, they showed Sergeant Miller just crying his head off. And he said, if it weren't for Father Emil, I would not be here. And unfortunately, what happened is he brought so much hope to the camp that the Chinese took him away and they never saw him. So, it's the way you live your life that gives glory to God. If you live it more like Jesus Christ, yeah, you might suffer. But you know what? You feel good when you suffer for someone that deserves it. You feel good when you're suffering for someone because you're defending them or you're protecting them. That is the beauty about suffering. It can actually make you feel proud and make you feel good. And that's exactly what the Lord wants. When you look at a crucifix, the most beautiful example, the most beautiful symbol of Christianity is the crucifix, not the cross. Because what do you see? You see the Lord nailed to the cross. That cross represents you and me. In other words, the Lord picked you, carried you, and he nailed himself to you. And what is he saying? I will never leave you. No matter what you say to me, no matter what you do to me, I will never leave you. I am nailed to you. And I will stay with you till the end. That's why the crucifix represents Christianity. Because that cross represents me and the Lord together. And that's what it's all about. Staying together. Thank you so much.